Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. This is your accounting instructor, Salare. Today, we are going to start a topic of correction of errors. Guys, you already know that during the recording of transactions, there are certain chances of making errors by an accountant. It means to say that when he records those transactions, there are chances that due to the pressure of work or due to the insufficient time, he may make such errors in recording the transactions. These errors are of two types. The errors which are not revealed by the trial balance and the errors which result the trial balance not balancing. There are two types of error, or we can divide these errors in two different categories. A type of error which are not revealed by the trial balance, and those errors which revealed or which are revealed by the trial balance. Before we move on to this topic, let me give you a little recap that whenever a transaction is occurred, it is recorded in books of prime entries like sales journal, purchase journal, sales return journal, purchase return journal, general, and cash books. Later, these transactions are grouped together and classified into T accounts, into ledgers or T accounts. Like all the similar transactions of sales are recorded in sales account. All the transactions of uh, purchases are recorded in purchases account. All the transactions of uh, bank are recorded in the bank account, cash in the cash account, salaries in the salaries account. So all, different classifications are there of T accounts. The T accounts are made with different classifications. Later, the balances of these T accounts are basically summarized in trial balance. Trial balance is basically a list of all the balances in which the balance brought down or the balances which have been paid are recorded. In trial balance, this is the format which I've just shown it to you. A trial balance has all the balances of assets on the debit side, all the balances of liabilities on credit side, all the balances of capital on credit side, all the balances of revenue, all the balances of expenses on debit side. Later, these are added. Assets and expenses are added to make the total of debit, whereas liabilities, capital, and revenue are added to make the total of credit side. And remember, your debit and credit are equal. Your trial balance should be equal. Debit and credit should be equal, which shows that all the transactions have been correctly made. Then further we discuss about that accounting are classified into 5 categories: assets, liabilities, revenue, and expenses. And each class, like asset is a class, so it has different T accounts. It has different accounts. Like in assets, we have cash account, bank account, Mr. A, who is our credit customer, Mr. A's account, Mr. B, another credit customer's account, Mr. C, another credit customer's account. So all the accounts related to assets are recorded under the heading of assets. Same way, all the accounts of liabilities, for example, Mr. D is our credit supplier. His account is going to be made in the class of liability. Mr. E is another supplier. Bank overdraft, if the bank is negative, its account would be called liability. In the same manner, in revenue, we can have sales account, we can have gain on disposal account, we can have different accounts, different are actually revenues here. Then further expenses, we can have rent account, we can have insurance, we can have purchases, we can have salaries. So all these accounts are actually categorized under the heading of expenses. So these are basically the classes: assets, liabilities, capital, expense, and revenue. And under each class, we have different accounts. I hope it is clear to you. Now let's get back to our topic. As we said, that there are errors which occurred in day-to-day transactions, and these errors have been classified into two: errors due to which trial balance is not affected. Remember, the trial balance is not going to be affected. Why? Because the trial balance is just a list of balances, the figure. If the figures are written on the both side, whether they are wrong or right, the trial balance is not going to be affected. For example, if there is a transaction in which the amount is written wrong on both the debit and credit side, the trial balance will be equal. Let me give you an example on that, right? We'll discuss this a little bit later. So first, those transactions which are not going to affect the trial balance, and another transactions are, or another errors are, which will result the trial balance not balancing. In other words, that these errors are going to affect the trial balance. But today we are going to discuss about only those errors which are not revealed by the trial balance. What are those errors? Guys, these errors are called error of commission, error of omission, error of principal, error of complete reversal, error of original entry, and compensating errors. These are the 6 types of errors which are not revealed by the trial balance, which are not going to be discovered by the trial balances. But you will get to know from different transactions. However, if these errors are not going to affect the trial balance, it does not mean that they should not be rectified. Why? Because these errors are somehow going to affect your profit for the year, or they might going to affect any part of your income statement or statement of financial position. So you need to be very much careful that when these errors are made by the business, these errors must be rectified by means of general entries. It means to say that when we discovered these errors, when we get to know about these errors must be rectified by making general entries. Now, let's discuss about how these errors are identified and corrected. In your paper, in O-level papers, they will give you transactions, and with those transactions, they will ask you to identify whether these are the error of commission, omission, principal, or reversal. And after identification of these errors, you need to make the corrected general entry as well, so that these errors can be rectified. I have given you a table here. We have made a table here for you to make you understand, to make it quite easy. In here, we have given you the name of errors, the description of errors. When you know the description of errors, you can easily identify whether this transaction is of error of commission, omission, principal, reversal, whatsoever. Then I have given you an example here. After the example, I am highlighting here the corrected entry. Guys, in your paper, you will be asked to prepare this corrected entry only. But along with it, we have written 2 types of entry here with the name of original and error. These are basically preferred by some teachers, that you should make these errors. So you can make these entries so that you will be able to make the corrected entry easily. Now, what are those entries? Let me clarify this. First of all, here it is written original entry. Guys, original entry means while reading the transaction, what was supposed to be the original entry? What entry should the accountant have been made? What was supposed to be the original entry? The error entry means by error, accountant has made the entry. Which type of error an accountant has made while making the entry? And finally, the corrected one, how are we going to correct this entry? How are we going to correct this recording? This would be done with the corrected entry as well. Again, in your paper, you will be asked to prepare the corrected entry only. For original and errored entry, you can use rough working. Now let's start with the task. The first is error of commission. How are we going to identify that? Remember, beta, this type of error occurs when the transaction is entered using the correct amount on the correct side. It means to say the transaction has been correctly recorded with the amount. The amount was correctly written. Secondly, the sides were correctly written. What was supposed to be debited was debited. What was supposed to be credited was credited. However, the error was of wrong account of same class. It means to say that in each class, there are different accounts. For example, in the class of asset, during a transaction, in a class of asset, cash was supposed to be recorded or cash was supposed to be increased, but we increased the bank account. So the class was same, accounts were different. In the same manner, in the class of liability, the account of Mr. D was supposed to be increased. We increased Mr. E's account. So it was the same class, but the wrong accounts. The same way, the rent was supposed to be increased, but we increased the salary account. That means the class was same, but the accounts were different. The accounts were wrongly made. So when this type of error is identified, where the amount was correct, sides were correct, but actually the accounts were wrong. So these were basically known as error of commission. Let me give you an example. With an example, I will explain it to you with how to prepare these journal entries, right? Now, the very first thing is checks received from Wasim. It's an example. Check received from Wasim. What was supposed to be the original entry here? What was supposed to be the original entry here? We received a check from Wasim. So bank should have been debited and Wasim should have been credited. Asset, bank is an asset. Asset should have been increased here and another asset, which is our trade receivable, should have been decreased because the customer has paid to us. So bank should have been debited, whereas Wasim should have been credited. My dear students, remember, if you are very good at journal entries, you will easily be able to prepare these corrected entries. So before you start this topic, you should prepare yourself or you should revise the journal entries, the rules of debit and credit. Let's get back to this work. So according to this entry that the check received from Wasim, our bank should have been debited and Wasim's account should have been credited. But by error, what we did, bank was rightly written on the debit side. Bank was rightly written on the debit side. But instead of Wasim, we credited Nasim's account. We credited Nasim's account. Now, Wasim and Nasim both are our assets. Both are our trade receivables. Right? Both are our trade receivables. So now you can see here that class is same, but accounts are wrongly written. Wasim account was supposed to be credited, but we actually credited Nasim's account. So this is called error of commission. How are we going to correct it? Remember, beta, the bank is correctly written. There is no worry about bank. Bank was supposed to be debited. It is correctly written here. Now let's discuss how to correct it. Beta, Nasim account was wrongly written here. Nasim's account was wrongly credited here. So we will debit his account so that his account would be increased again. So Nasim's account would be increased and would be written on debit side. So this entry has been made and Wasim's account was not made. So we will make Wasim's account on credit side. we will make Wasim's account on credit side. Remember, Nasim account was wrongly made, so we rectified it by making it on the debit side, and Wasim's account was recorded on the credit side. So this entry was corrected here. Let me give you another example so you'll be able to understand that. The second example is, for example, rent paid by cash credited to bank account. Rent paid by cash credited to bank account. Now again, what was supposed to be the original entry? By error and corrected entry. So again, when you pay rent by cash, rent is an expense, it is debited, and cash is an asset which is decreased, so it is going to be credited. So rent should have been debited originally and cash should have been credited. But by error, rent was correctly written. But instead of cash, we credited the bank account. Instead of cash, we credited the bank account. So here, cash was supposed to be decreased, but we decreased the bank account. Now, cash and bank both are assets. So the class is same, accounts are wrongly written. This is error of commission. Now remember that when this error occurs, you have to rectify it. The account which was wrongly credited should be debited. So you are going to debit the bank account. It is rectified, and the cash account should be credited. So the wrong amount or the wrong account was debited, and the cash which was account was not credited, we have credited this account. Let me give you third example. The third example is that purchased goods on credit from Mr. Akram had been credited to Akmal's account. Now here we purchase goods on credited. So originally the entry should have been purchases debit and Akram's account, which is a liability, should have been credited. But by error, what we did? By error, purchases was debited. It was right. Purchases was rightly recorded. However, instead of Akram, we credited Akmal's account. Now, purchases was rightly written. Akram and Akmal both are our liabilities. They are our liabilities. They are our trade payables. So, class is same. Accounts are wrongly written here. Now, what are we going to do? We are going to rectify it. Akmal account was wrongly credited, so we are going to debit it. So Akmal will be debited and Akram account was not made. So we are going to prepare Akram's account on credit side. This is how we are going to rectify the entries. I hope this transaction or this particular part is clarified to you. Let me give you quickly a briefing that error of commission is when the sides and amount has been correctly written, but the accounts were wrongly written. I hope this is quite clear to you. If you have understood and liked this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with other people so that other people can also be benefited. Thank you. Take care.